My name is Noelle Whitaker, and I've been called many things in life. Ambitious, cold, intimidating. But her weird cousin from out west? That one was new. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, inside a sun-drenched estate tucked deep in the hills of Connecticut. My sister Serena's engagement party. Champagne was flowing, violins played in the background, and every corner of the house whispered money. I arrived 10 minutes early, wearing a navy silk blouse and heels that had crossed more boardrooms than weddings. No one greeted me. Serena spotted me near the hors d'oeuvres and gave a tight-lipped smile. "You made it," she said, like I'd RSVP'd to a root canal. Her fiancé, Troy, ambled over moments later, wrapped an arm around her waist, and asked, "This your cousin, the, one from out west?" Then to the crowd, "She's kind of the oddball artist of the family." I didn't blink, just smiled and sipped my drink, until, "Did you say Whitaker?" A deeper voice cut through the clinking glasses. An older man turned around slowly from the fireplace. Silver hair, sharp suit, eyes narrowed right at me. "As in Whitaker Holdings?" And just like that, the air in the room shifted. Serena and I didn't grow up like sisters. We shared a mother and a hallway, but little else. She was the daughter of my stepfather, born into a world where everything she touched was praised. I, on the other hand, was the daughter of a man no one ever talked about, least of all my mother. Growing up, I learned early to keep my head down. I wasn't the kind of kid who got framed photos on the mantle or a school recital seat saved in the front row. Serena got ballet lessons and birthday parties with ponies. I got a bus pass and a list of chores taped to the fridge. It wasn't that she was cruel, not at first. It was that she never noticed me. Not when I aced exams, not when I left for college on a scholarship, and certainly not when I started my own firm from nothing but student loans and pure spite. She existed in a universe where I was either invisible or inconvenient. And our mother? She didn't make things easier. Her love was selective, performative, something you had to earn through obedience or convenience. I remember once in high school, Serena got caught shoplifting lip gloss. My mother called the store manager and somehow had the security footage erased. 2 weeks later, I missed curfew by 15 minutes and had my phone taken away for a month. That's how it always went. By the time I was in my 30s, we'd gone nearly a decade without speaking. The last time was a rushed Christmas call, the kind that ends with "say hi to mom," and a hang-up before you can respond. I didn't expect an invitation to her engagement party. When it arrived, I assumed it was a mistake, or an obligation on our mother's part. Still, some part of me showed up, maybe out of curiosity. Maybe because some small corner of my heart wanted to believe things could be different. But the moment I stepped into that house and felt the stares, the kind reserved for something dragged in, not invited, I knew. Serena hadn't changed. Neither had our mother, who air-kissed me at the door and said, "Try not to make things awkward, dear." Awkward. That was the word she used for existing. I watched Serena float around the room in her pastel dress, flawless and composed, her diamond ring flashing with every champagne toast. Troy, her fiancé, was just as polished, tall, confident, the kind of man who knew how to charm a room and turn cold behind closed doors. When he approached me, it wasn't to welcome. It was to manage. "We told everyone you were Serena's cousin," he murmured, voice low. "It's simpler, less explaining." I raised an eyebrow. "Simpler for whom?" His smile tightened. "For the family." There it was. The old familiar message. Stay in your corner, be small, don't take up space you weren't given permission to occupy. I almost laughed. Almost. But then I heard the voice. Mr. Harold Ashcroft, the groom's father, cutting through the room like a scalpel, asking about my last name. That one word, Whitaker, had stopped him in his tracks. And for the first time in years, someone looked at me not with pity or dismissal, but with fear. You'd think that after Harold Ashcroft spoke, someone else might step in, ask who I was, offer a drink, maybe even apologize for the weird cousin label. But the room did what rooms like that always do. It pretended nothing happened. The conversation restarted. Serena laughed a little louder. Troy pulled her away to meet a cousin from Atlanta, And I stood there with my untouched flute of champagne, invisible again. Only Harold kept looking, calculating. He didn't approach me, not yet, but I saw him speaking to someone, his assistant, I guessed, who immediately took out a phone and started searching. I moved toward the back patio. The cold November air was better company than the tension inside. I'd almost made it to the steps when I heard stilettos behind me. "Noelle!" Serena called, as if dragging my name across her tongue. "I didn't realize you were going to come." "I RSVP'd," I said without turning. 3 weeks ago." "Yes, well," she sighed. "I figured you'd change your mind. You're always unpredictable." That was her word for me. Not resilient, not independent, unpredictable. "I think Troy handled things well, don't you?" she added. "It's just easier for people to think you're my cousin. Not everyone understands our dynamic." "You mean the part where you pretend I'm not your sister?" She stiffened. "Must you be dramatic?" "No," I said, finally facing her. "But I must be accurate." She looked away, fiddling with the hem of her sleeve. "This day isn't about us, Noelle. Please don't make it into something it's not." "It never was about us. It was always about her." She walked off before I could answer, disappearing into the glittering maze of guests. I stood there, steadying my breath, when a voice interrupted. "Noelle Whitaker?" I turned. Harold Ashcroft was now beside me, more serious than before. "Mind if I ask, are you the Whitaker? Of Whitaker Holdings?" I didn't flinch. "I'm the founder and managing partner of Whitaker Holdings, yes." His eyes widened slightly, but he recovered fast. "I thought so. I've seen your name in the merger proposal. We've been in talks, though your team has kept things anonymous." "That was intentional." "I see." He paused. "Do you know what company we're merging with?" "I do." I smiled faintly. "Do your son and daughter-in-law?" The color drained from his face. He didn't answer. I left him there, speechless, and returned inside. As I passed Troy, he smirked like he still had control, like nothing had shifted. It was almost impressive, his blindness to consequence. A cousin I didn't recognize leaned toward him and whispered, "Who is she, really?" Troy shrugged. "Some finance type. Serena's family's got odd branches." I kept walking. Let them have their whispers. Let them stay ignorant for one more night. Because soon, they'd realize that I wasn't a branch on Serena's tree. I was the storm coming for their entire orchard. And just before I reached the exit, I passed our mother, holding court near the piano with 2 distant aunts. She barely looked up as I moved by, but she did say one thing, low and tight. "You always have to make everything about you." I paused, turned just slightly. "No, Mom, you just hate it when I don't let you make it about you." Her jaw clenched. The aunts fell silent. I walked on. In that house full of curated smiles and veiled contempt, I was the only one who didn't need to pretend. I didn't stay long after that. I made my rounds, spoke politely to strangers who wouldn't remember my name, and thanked the servers who looked me in the eye longer than anyone else in the room had. I'd already made the impact I needed to. Now it was just a matter of time. The merger proposal had been in the works for months. My firm, Whitaker Holdings, had quietly acquired 3 distressed subsidiaries that Ashcroft Capital depended on. It was a long game, strategic, discreet. I didn't need them to know my name during negotiations. I just needed them to sign. What Harold hadn't realized, until he saw me standing in his home, sipping his champagne, was that the woman behind the anonymous holding group had been right beside his son the entire time. And Troy? He didn't even see it. Not when Harold pulled him aside later that evening. Not when I caught Serena watching me from across the room, confusion blooming into something uglier. Not even when his father canceled the remainder of the party's speeches and disappeared into his study with 3 phone calls waiting. The next morning, I received a text from my associate. "Harold's team called. They want to fast-track the deal, but they're asking if you'll meet in person. He insisted." I replied with 2 words. "Next week." By Tuesday, I was sitting across from Harold in a glass-walled office overlooking Manhattan. He didn't offer pleasantries this time. "Why didn't you tell anyone who you were?" he asked, straight to the point. "Because no one asked," I said. His jaw tightened. "You let my son insult you." "No," I corrected. "Your son insulted someone he thought had no value. That's different." Harold leaned back, steepling his fingers. "This merger is important to us." "I know." "I also know you have the leverage to change terms." I tilted my head. "I could. But I won't." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm not here to punish your company. I'm here to finish a deal. But I'll say this once. Keep your son out of future discussions. He's arrogant, short-sighted, and careless. 3 things I don't negotiate with." For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then he nodded. "Understood." By Friday, the revised documents were signed. My name was printed across every contract header, every transfer of ownership, every future clause. Troy's name was nowhere. That weekend, I got another invitation. Serena's bridal shower. I declined. She called me for the first time in years. "Why didn't you tell me what you do?" I paused. "You never asked." There was a silence on the line that stretched too long. Then she said, "Everyone's talking about you now. Dad's impressed." "I'm not doing this for Dad." "I know," she whispered, "but still, it's weird. I feel like I never knew you." "You didn't." I hung up gently. Because the truth was, she never tried, and now she'd have to live with the consequences of building her castle on a foundation she chose to ignore. Later that night, I received an email from one of Harold's board members. The subject line read, "Discreet respect." The message simply said, "You earned that room's attention without raising your voice. You have my respect." It shouldn't have mattered, but in a quiet way, it did. Not because I needed their approval, but because I had once believed I never would earn it. I poured myself a drink, nothing fancy, just a dark rum over ice, and sat near the window of my apartment, watching the lights of the city blink back at me like they knew. This wasn't the revenge I'd imagined as a girl lying awake in that cold room down the hall from Serena. But maybe it was better. No public drama, no shouted vindication. Just this: power, silence, and the luxury of not needing their applause. The following week, I received a handwritten letter. Yes, an actual letter from Serena. It arrived in a cream-colored envelope sealed in gold. Her handwriting hadn't changed since high school. Soft curves, hearts over every I. She wrote that she hoped I would reconsider attending the wedding, that Troy had apologized. He didn't mean to be cruel, just nervous, and that our mother regretted how things had come across. She hoped we could start fresh. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I was finally fully done performing for people who only saw me when they needed something. Instead, I made a phone call. Harold's assistant picked up on the first ring. I told her to transfer ownership of the 3 subsidiary properties acquired under the merger, not to Ashcroft Capital, but to a nonprofit educational trust under my name. I'd been planning to liquidate them quietly, but now I saw more use in legacy than leverage. She hesitated. "That's a generous gesture, Miss Whitaker." "No," I said. "It's strategic. I'd rather build something that lasts than keep feeding men who can't see past a woman in heels." She laughed softly, then caught herself. "Noted. I'll move the paperwork forward." The day of the wedding, I received photos through a cousin I barely knew. Serena looked radiant, as always. Troy grinned wide in every frame, but behind their smiles, I recognized a strain, like they were smiling harder to make up for something invisible to others, but obvious to me. Apparently, Harold had stepped down from the board the day before. The merger had gone through, on my terms, and Whitaker Holdings now owned 51% of their regional division. I went for a long walk that morning. Through Central Park, scarf tucked into my coat, latte in hand, no assistants, no calls, just air and quiet. A child ran past me, chasing a balloon. His mother laughed behind him. I smiled, not at them, but at something else. A weight that had finally lifted. The kind that comes when you stop asking people to see you and start seeing yourself instead. I sat on a bench as the wind picked up, pulled out my phone, and opened the voicemail Serena had left the night before. Her voice was softer than I remembered. Noelle, I guess I just want to say I'm sorry. Not just for that party. For, everything. For not seeing you. For letting Mom's voice drown yours. I wish I'd been different. She paused. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know. I deleted the message. Not out of cruelty. Out of peace. Some stories don't need a reply. They need an ending. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't replay her words later that night, sitting in my living room, barefoot, jazz humming low in the background. For years, I wanted her to see me, really see me. Not the shell, not the cautionary tale of a sister who left and got cold, but the woman who built something from nothing, who climbed without a ladder, who survived. And still, when she finally looked, it was too late. Our mother, for her part, sent no letter, no apology, just a carefully worded email days after the wedding. Hope you're well. It was a lovely event. We missed you. I didn't answer that, either. Instead, I forwarded it to my attorney to finalize the trust documents. I added a clause that would use one of the transferred buildings to open a vocational center for young women from low-income families. Not just scholarships, real skill training, financial literacy, career prep, a launch pad. Because if my family couldn't see the value in what I'd become, maybe someone else would benefit from the woman I had to build alone. I also made one small change to the center's name. I called it the Odd Cousin Foundation. When the press release went out, Serena's friends shared it across social media, tagging her again and again. Isn't this your cousin's company? Wow! Your cousin's doing amazing work. What an inspiring story. You must be proud. She blocked most of them. And that was the thing. No matter how much she tried to reshape the narrative, the truth had already slipped into the public. I wasn't the weird cousin anymore. I was the woman who rewrote the ending. Not with noise, not with bitterness, but with precision. I didn't burn bridges. I bought the river, rerouted the current, and built something better on the other side. A month later, I received a holiday card from Harold Ashcroft. It was formal, tasteful, printed on thick ivory stock. Inside, a single handwritten sentence in dark blue ink. Thank you for reminding us who we were dealing with. There was no signature, none needed. I pinned the card to the inside of my office cabinet, next to an old photo of me at 23. Tired eyes, cheap suit, standing outside the first building I leased for my startup. Back then, I still thought I needed their table, their attention, their blessing. Now I owned the table. I chose the seats, and I didn't need applause to know I was right where I was meant to be. Sometimes I thought about what would have happened if Serena had introduced me correctly that day. If Troy hadn't dismissed me with a smirk, if my mother had reached for me instead of retreating behind social perfection, would I have given them another chance? Maybe, but I'm glad they didn't, because the way they treated me wasn't an accident. It was instinct, and instincts, especially ones built on superiority, rarely shift without consequence, and instincts don't change overnight. I haven't spoken to Serena since the voicemail. She hasn't tried again. Maybe she's waiting for the right time. Or maybe she knows there won't be one. And that's fine. We all have to live with the stories we tell, the ones we tell others, and the ones we tell ourselves. She spent years telling herself I was difficult, distant, dramatic. It made it easier for her to stay the favorite, the golden one, the daughter who fit. But now, the world knew a different story, and I didn't need to defend it. I just had to live it. One afternoon, as I sat in a quiet cafe finishing a meeting, a young intern from another firm approached me, nervously clutching a notebook. Are you Noelle Whitaker? I am. Her eyes lit up. I just wanted to say, what you did with the foundation. It's changed how I see everything. Thank you. I smiled. For once, not because I needed to, but because someone finally saw me, not for what I wasn't, but for who I had become. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Redemption doesn't always come from those who hurt you. Sometimes, it comes from those who were watching and chose to see you clearly. And in the quiet that followed, with nothing left to prove, I felt something rare. Not victory, not power, just peace. And for the first time in years, it was enough.